Story 1. At one time, I had the 11th fastest time trial in the world on Baby Park in Mario Kart Double Dash. While you may think people would be amazed by this, it turns out they mostly are not. I also once out power slid a blue shell in Double Dash, and it's still somewhere recorded on VHS in my parents' basement. Story 2. Starting from 6th grade until the pandemic, I competed in Scrabble tournaments in my school. Then they made me participate in Scrabble tournaments against other schools. One time we were placed in 2nd place. That was the very first time I ever felt like I was good at something. I tried hard, but it just felt natural to me. It looks like people care about chess more, so yeah. Story 3, Travel Bro here. I've been all over the place and have hundreds of cool stories from various adventures around the world. But for the longest time, I couldn't figure out why when I visit home it's just business as usual. Took me way too long to realize that no one actually cares. Story 4. While in high school, I put together a strong Quiz Bowl-like team, which then advanced to its state championship and became the first team from my school in 9 years to win the whole thing. My history teacher was thrilled with receiving that trophy, and they added to that by winning the state championship again just 3 and 4 years later. Story 5. I have radio frequency identification implants in my hands, for in total, 2 in each hand. They let me do things like arm and disarm my alarm system, open my safe, open my garage door, unlock various doors, and log into my computer just by touch, as well as clone some common access control badges like hotel keys to my hand. Is it super useful? Not really. I mean, I use them almost daily, but it's not like they're saving me that much time or effort. It's more of a novelty than anything, and most people have either an unimpressed or, more often, weirded out reaction to learning I have them. Some people also think I've taken the literal mark of the beast, but I live in the Bible Belt, so that was expected from the beginning. Some people also think the government can use them to track me. They can't, because that's not what radio frequency identification is, and they're not even powered unless they're in close proximity to a reader. I like to remind those people that every one of us is voluntarily carrying a global positioning system tracker in our pockets these days. Story 6. I have a supersized bladder. Most people can hold between 400 and 600 milliliters maximum and feel like they have to go when it's only 200 to 300 milliliters. My bladder can hold over 1,000 milliliters, about 32 ounces, and I often don't really feel the need to urinate until it is 600 to 800 milliliters full. How did I find out? I had a stroke when I was 40, and I had been to the local emergency room for a bit and then was airlifted to another hospital. I had been there for several hours when I felt like I had to go. They were busy with me, so I patiently waited for an opportunity. Time passed, and I told them I needed to go, but they wouldn't let me get up and go. A bedpan or catheter were my options, so I let them catheterize me, and the nurse brought in a 1-liter container. It started filling, and once we got to about 800 milliliters, she started getting worried and asked for another container. Someone came in from outside the room at the last second with another container, and I kept filling a little more. Almost 1,200 milliliters total on that pee. They told me I had a superhuman bladder a few days later when I was regularly urinating 800 milliliters at a time. No medals given though. Story 7. Oh, I have so many. I am hypermobile and thus can scratch any spot on my back with no problem. I was born without wisdom teeth. I was able to develop ways of compensating that completely mask the fact that I have dyslexia. Story 8. I have a C1 level in English and B2 in French, but I'm almost C1. I am an examiner of Diplôme d'études en langue française exams, and I've been a teacher for almost 10 years. My first language is Spanish. Story 9. I used to play a lot of League of Legends and was Challenger, which is the top 200 on the server. I got to play against Faker, the Michael Jordan of League of Legends, in a few solo queue games in 2016 when Worlds was in the United States and held my own against him. Story 10. I just got the second best full-time GPA of any semester in my life. The reason this is significant is that I've suffered from a cognitive deficit for many years now, and this is a sign that I've recovered. Otherwise, why brag about second best? Story 11. I founded a Porchfest concert series in my town. Monthly porch concerts in the summer are now going into its 6th year. No friends or family have bothered to come to any of them. It is disappointing because it is something I am really proud of and everyone's reaction is indifferent. I do not bother inviting people anymore. Story 12. A few months ago, I was looking for something in the woods under some rocks. I started lurking, lifting, and licking. I can now lurk a mile in 6 minutes. Story 13. When I was 15, I won first place in my school's math competition. It's not a huge deal and happened ages ago, but honestly, it's the highlight of my math journey. Even now, I still think of it as a personal milestone. Story 14. I figured out in the last couple of days that I can do monkey bars. I think I've probably been strong enough for a while, just never really tried. I could never do it as a kid, so being able to finally do it as a much larger, lankier adult is kind of cool to me. Story 15. I was one of the first people to play many classic computer games. Most of them are obscure Atari 8-bit, Atari ST, and DOS PC games. My dad's best buddy was a prolific hacker and had most games before they came out, some with alternate titles and unfinished versions. Story 16. As someone that has a bibliophilic problem, I'm very proud of myself for only checking out one book at the library today instead of several that I never finish. Story 17. About 20 years ago, I used to work with a guy who would brag he won every internet argument he got into on message boards and was undefeated. No one cared. It's really funny how I found this out because I mentioned if someone said something wrong or generally dumb, I would reply once with correct information, and if they started arguing they were right, I just ignored them. His response was, "So you're seriously just fine with losing every argument on the internet?" It turns out his definition of winning an argument was getting the last post in, continuing to reply and refusing to stop arguing until the other person just gave up and didn't respond. He also bragged about his legendary argument win where he and a few other people went back and forth for months. I think he said 4, but I forget. Until the administrators of the message board finally locked the topic to make them stop. As it happened, he was the last person to post prior to locking, therefore, in his eyes, making him the winner. He said it would be remembered as the most legendary epic argument win of all time. This guy seriously thought this would go down in internet lore. He bragged about how many arguments he won. He would never give me any links to the message board, but I expected it to just be people screaming at each other in a massive flame war. But he really thought people at work would care about this. Story 18. Like many kids, I owned BB guns. One day, I spotted one BB laying around on the street. Being on the second story, I took aim with my BB gun and hit it on the second try. Story 19. The fact that I feel free, safe, happy, and peaceful even though I have $33 to my name, no job, no home, and no partner feels pretty amazing to be this grateful, but no one gets it. Story 20. I put a road reflector on top of a roadside hotel sign that has stayed in the same spot for approximately 13 years. I just drove by it the other day and confirmed it's still there. My friends and I used to hide them across the city. This one is in plain sight, and I confirmed I can see it from Google Maps Street View going back to 2012. Story 21. I went 17-0 to win my league's fantasy football championship last year. And as of tonight's very narrow win, I'm returning to the championship despite starting off 2-6 and finishing 8-7. Story 22. I made the championship game in both of my fantasy football leagues for the first time I've accomplished this feat. One team had lost 4 in a row, backed into the playoffs based on points, and trounced the number 1 seed in the first week of playoffs. Story 23. I live my life like a talk show. I know the capitals, national flags, and topographic maps of many countries. I have a positive attitude toward hard times. I also have a considerable collection of Pop Mart toys. Story 24. I own 4% of a Bitcoin and I'm low-key proud of that. Who knows where Bitcoin will be in 10, 20, or 30 years from now, but it will probably be higher than it is right now. Story 25. I ordered the first beer served at Voodoo Fest in New Orleans in 2019 and followed that accomplishment by buying the first beer sold at the opening of the new Louis Armstrong New Orleans International Airport terminal a few months later. The airport beer was warm and purchased off the hand truck, bringing the initial stock into the airport. Story 26. They removed the Megatouch Word Dojo game from a bar I used to go to because, no matter how many times they beat my high score, I would quickly be number 1 again. Story 27. I can properly fry eggs where the white is solid and the yolk is runny. Apparently, this is a lost art because the last 3 times straight when I ate breakfast out at restaurants, my over-easy eggs were cooked through. Story 28. I have crazy stories about the weirdos I meet, but people find those interesting. I have a third nipple, but that fascinates people more than it should too. Story 29. In Forza Horizon 4, I used to have the world record for the main race in the expansion map, the Leviathan on Fortune Island. Before my run, the top 30 all used the same car, considered to be the only option for records. However, I spent a month tuning and grinding with a different car and beat them. This started a trend of people realizing that other cars can be competitive in that race, and now the leaderboard is mixed. Story 30. I built a team of world-class software developers in 6 countries who are all happy in their positions and very well paid. In over 10 years, I've had 3 developers come and go. Story 31. This last summer, my college had a program where the alumni nominated their fellow alumni whom they thought were doing really cool things in our relatively small field. I was the first nominee. I now know what it means when people say, "It's just an honor to be nominated." The person who nominated me hadn't talked to me in years, and I was the first name on the list because of him. It made my entire day, week, and month. Long story short, I didn't win, but I nominated the winner. Story 32. I have an 80s coin-operated video arcade in my basement. I made the Guinness Book of World Records in 2013. I passed the Fundamentals of Engineering exam my senior year of college despite not yet having taken 3 of the courses I was being tested on. Then I dropped out of school because I realized I just did not care at all about engineering. Never went back. Story 33. I am ridiculously good at applying screen protectors onto phones without the need for the fancy gimmicks the expensive ones come with. Give me a dollar store glass or plastic protector and 5 minutes and you'll have it placed without any bubbles or lint under the screen. It will be flawless. Everyone who knows of this skill always brings their phones to me when they break their protector, and after I perform what I consider a miracle right in front of them, they just kind of walk away with a nice thanks. Yeah, you're welcome. Story 34. Back when Battlefield Bad Company 2 multiplayer was huge, I was at one point in the top 10 players worldwide on Xbox 360. The guy I regularly teamed up with became number 1, but I think I was somewhere around 7 to 9. Now it's just a neat story that's completely meaningless. Story 35. Taught myself the basics of flying a plane. Now, I can confidently fly planes in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 using procedures and knowledge real pilots have. I'm not a pilot because I have epilepsy. Story 36. I saw 2 unidentified flying objects, one of which was professionally investigated by a professor. Came back as an unknown object in the conclusion. Nobody even seemed to care after I posted a video of it. It's weird that no one gives a crap. It's always, "Oh, that could be anything," and a lot of doubt. I have told my story, and legitimately no one gives a damn. But it's cool to me, and it was an eye-opener. Story 37. I lived in a small apartment, and down the block they built these 700-something-foot buildings. Every night after I came home from work, right before I walked inside, I'd look at those tall buildings, admiring how they illuminated the night sky. My dream was to move to a tall building like that and have the opportunity to look out my window and see for miles, observing everything around me. Then one day my landlord told me she sold the apartment and it was going to get demolished. So, I frantically looked around for a new place and found an apartment on the top floor. Now, every night before I go to bed, I look out my window and observe the greatest view I've ever had in my life. I tell people about it and no one really cares, but I'm proud of where I live. It is unfortunate that the building has no elevator and I have to walk a lot of stairs every day, but it's worth it. Story 38. I know the names of all the bones in the body. The only time it's ever come up is when someone asked me to prove it on a Halloween skeleton during a Halloween party. They stopped paying attention somewhere around the humerus. Story 39. I was the chief executive officer of a credit union branch at 11 years old. It was a branch of a legitimate credit union set up in my elementary school for kids to work at and deposit money during recess. In grade 6, I was promoted to chief executive officer. Story 40. mainly high school achievements. My most proud one being an all-state vocalist for 6 out of 6 years. 3 years in junior high since ninth grade was considered junior high still, and 3 years of high school. I was also selected as a jazz all-state vocalist for 3 of 3 possible years. I was one of 2 of my part and one of 24 out of the whole state to make the choir. Story 41. I rescued a dozen sheep. I was miles from civilization in the meadows late at night. Beyond the tree line, I could hear sheep bleating. They sounded spooked by something. I decided to investigate those noises. There was a barn and I could see that there was a fire. A small seated lawnmower had caught fire, and it had already spread to one side of the barn. The sheep were inside that barn. The barn was locked from the outside. I forced my way inside, and luckily I was still in time, as the fire was spreading fast. I went in and forced all the sheep outside. They are so incredibly dumb, though. I guess the fear made them do stupid things. A few of them wanted to return back into the barn while it was on fire, but I managed to save every single one of them. Only one had some burned patches of fur, but the sheep was fine otherwise. After I secured all the sheep, I called the fire department. They arrived maybe 15 minutes later. The barn was fully engulfed in flames and burned down completely. The farmer arrived, and he was very pleased with the fact that I was willing to risk my life for his sheep.